The room was designed to be calming, a fact I registered as a low-grade tactical threat. Its walls were a shade of off-white, calibrated to lower the heart rate. The air, conditioned to a constant 22 degrees Celsius, carried the engineered scent of jasmine and clean linen, a compound developed by Eterna to promote trust. Through the single sheet of polarized glass that served as the far wall, the enclave sprawled in a panorama of placid perfection. Manicured lawns, harmonious modernist homes, and the ever-present golden hour sunlight that never seemed to fade. All of it was a product of the stream, the full immersion reality humanity had chosen over the wreckage of the old world. All of it was a lie, but a functional one. Subject: Councillor Jennings, Martin. Male, mid-40s. His wellness score, a discrete number glowing a healthy blue-green beside his temple, read 9.4. An exemplary citizen. His posture was open, his hands rested, palms up on the polished birchwood of his desk. A tell. He was projecting sincerity, not feeling it. He was a system interface, a mouthpiece for the algorithms that managed our lives. My objective was simple: maintain my own baseline score above 8, answer his questions with the expected blend of resolved trauma and civic gratitude, and avoid attracting any unwanted systemic attention. "Your progress remains excellent, Conrad," Jennings said, his voice as smooth and frictionless as the architecture outside. "Eterna's cohesion models show your family unit has fully stabilized since your transition." He used the corporate term for my honorable discharge. I inclined my head in a gesture of assent I had practiced to look natural. "My family is my priority. My wife finds the environment restorative. My daughter, Thea, is thriving." These were facts, technically. They were also the correct answers. My internal monologue was a different dialect entirely. Wife, Celia. Emotional state, variable, prone to anxiety spikes. A potential liability in a crisis. Daughter, Thea. Age 12. Status, an unknown. She possesses a quiet that is not calm but observational. My love for them was a separate file, a dangerous piece of data I kept quarantined from operational analysis. It was my single greatest vulnerability. "And your own acclamation?" Jennings continued, his eyes studiable and benign. "The memories of your service in the old world, do they still present a challenge?" He was probing for the nightfall trigger. He knew my file. He knew about the mission, the miscalculation, the fatal stampede. He did not know that I saw the faces of the dead every time I closed my eyes, not as ghosts of guilt, but as data points in a catastrophic failure of analysis. The one time I let a subordinate's flawed intel override my own model. The one time my command collapsed. "The stream provides a peace that was not possible before," I stated. "I'm grateful for the order Eterna maintains." Jennings smiled, a flawless arrangement of teeth. "Good, very good. Just remember, Conrad, happiness is a choice, and we're all here to help you make the right one." He leaned back, a signal that the session was concluding. Then he froze. It was a change so minuscule, only a trained observer would catch it. His smile became fixed, a mask whose facial muscles had ceased receiving commands. His eyes, for a single beat, lost their focus. He leaned forward again, the practiced sincerity gone, replaced by an unnerving, conspiratorial intensity. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Of course, that's just the public script. Between you and me, I'm the one running this whole thing. It's a heavy burden, but someone has to." My biometrics remained stable. My training took over. Event: anomaly. Category: unscheduled script deviation. Subject: Jennings. Status: compromised. Possible cause: system error. Psychological break. I ran a quick loop. Observe. The subject is delusional. Orient. This is a deviation from all known Eterna protocols. Decide. Extract myself from the situation. Gather intelligence. Assess threat level. I rose slowly. "Thank you for your time, Counselor." My comm implant, a subcutaneous device behind my ear, vibrated with a sharp, insistent demand. I touched my temple to answer, my eyes never leaving Jennings. My wife's voice was thin, stretched taut with panic. "Conrad, you need to come home," she said, her words tripping over one another. "Right now. Something strange is happening with the neighbors, with everyone. The Hendersons, the Lees. They're all saying the most peculiar thing. They think they're in charge." The anomaly was not isolated. It was systemic, a cascade failure. My mission parameters changed instantly. I looked back at Jennings. He had already dismissed me, his attention turned to the window, where he was muttering about recalibrating the atmospheric particulates. He was no longer a compromised subject. He was an environmental hazard. I moved through the civic hub with a disciplined speed that drew no attention. The enclave's placid surface was beginning to fracture. I saw two men, neighbors who usually exchanged pleasantries about their lawn maintenance drones, now locked in a silent, intense standoff, each looking at the other with the unnerving certainty of a god confronting a pretender. A woman was calmly explaining to a service drone that its function was now obsolete, as she would be handling all sanitation telekinetically. Chaos, the very thing I was engineered to contain. But this was a new kind of chaos, not born of panic, but of absolute competing certainties. My home was a short walk away. I cut across my own perfect lawn, my mind already converting the floor plan into a defensible fortress, identifying fields of fire and points of ingress. I found Celia in the living room, pacing. She rushed to me, her wellness score flashing a frantic, unstable orange. "They're all insane," she whispered, grabbing my arm. "Everyone, they say they're running the sim." "Calm down, Celia," I said, my voice the anchor I had trained it to be. I took her by the shoulders, my grip firm. "We need a new protocol. We are going to the basement. We will secure it and wait for this event to pass." I was already stripping the situation down to its essentials. Unit integrity was paramount. That was when I saw my daughter. Thea was standing in the doorway to the hall, perfectly still, watching me. She was not panicked like her mother. Her expression was clear, lucid, and unreadable. She was the one variable that did not fit the pattern. She was not making a claim of control. I softened my voice, changing tactics. This was not a panicked civilian to be managed. This required a different approach. "Thea, are you okay?" She met my eyes directly. Her own wellness score was a steady, placid blue. Her voice was flat, an objective statement delivered without malice or emotion. It was a single, targeted piece of ordnance designed for maximum psychological impact. "You're the glitch." The words were a payload delivered directly to the command center of my brain. The statement was not an attack. It was a diagnosis. My internal analysis stuttered, searching for a framework, a category. It did not fit the emerging pattern. It was not the delusional claim of godhood I was already classifying as the primary threat, those acting with the conviction of rival commanders. Nor was it the witless, panicked parroting I'd heard from my wife on the comm. It was a targeted accusation from an anomaly, from my daughter. For a tenth of a second, I felt the structural integrity of my logic threaten to buckle. Then, training took over. You do not analyze an incoming projectile, you move to cover. "Celia, Thea, basement, now," I said. My voice was stripped of all affect, a flat command. "The basement? Conrad, what are you talking about?" Celia's voice was frayed. "We need to call Eterna Security." "Eterna is the system that is failing," I said, already moving, herding them before me. "The chain of command is broken. I am establishing a new one. Here." The basement was my one concession to my past, a space I had soundproofed under the pretense of a home theater. In reality, it was a pocket of control, a place where the pleasant, engineered sounds of the enclave could not penetrate. I sealed the heavy door, the solid thud of the lock a small, satisfying anchor in the spreading chaos. Celia clutched a decorative pillow to her chest, while Thea stood near the wall, her posture unchanged, her expression a perfect, unnerving neutral. A frantic pounding started on the door, not aggressive but desperate. "Conrad, Celia, please let us in." I analyzed the voice. Adam Beck, paramedic, I ran a quick assessment. Subject: Beck, Adam. Asset: advanced medical training, critical in a sustained crisis. Liability: high empathy, likely to prioritize sentiment over strategy. I made the calculation. The asset outweighed the liability. I opened the door to find Adam and two other neighbors, the Millers, their faces pale with shock. I let them in and secured the door behind them. "What is happening?" Mr. Miller stammered, his high wellness score now tinged with an unhealthy amber. "Everyone, they're talking nonsense. They're compromised," I stated, cutting through their panic. I pointed to the center of the room. "We are establishing a secure perimeter. Report what you have seen. Stick to facts." Adam stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room, assessing the state of the others. "A first responder's habit. It's a mass psychotic event. Some are claiming to be administrators of the simulation. Others are just catatonic. We need a framework," I said. I began to speak, laying out the grid of my new reality for them. "We will classify all individuals. There are the alpha cognitos, the ones with conviction, the rival commanders. They are the primary threat. There are the echoes, the followers, the noise. And there are the sleepers, the ones still acting normal. We treat them as potential hostiles hiding their awareness." I saw the look on Adam's face. It was a mixture of concern and revulsion. "Conrad, these are our neighbors, not hostiles and assets." "That distinction is a luxury we no longer have," I countered, turning to a wall schematic of the neighborhood I had on a tablet. "Our immediate priority is resources. The Eterna hubs are automated. They should still be operational. Adam, I need medical supplies. The rest of us need long-term rations. We are going on a reconnaissance mission." The world outside the door had decayed into a theater of the absurd. A woman stood on her roof, arms outstretched, trying to command the sun to set. Two men stood on opposite sides of the street, locked in a psychic battle that consisted of them glaring at each other intently. The air of the enclave was still, the temperature perfect, but the software running its inhabitants had been corrupted. As we moved, a low-profile fire team formation I had drilled into them, I noticed two of the self-proclaimed gods arguing over a hedge. They suddenly stopped, their heads turning in perfect unison to track our movement. The synchronicity was deeply concerning. They did not speak, but the shared, vacant stare felt like an accusation. We reached the local Eterna hub. Its glass doors slid open with their usual silence. The interior was pristine, fully stocked and utterly empty of staff. The system's automated infrastructure was intact. It was only the people who were broken. "Miller, you're on watch," I ordered. "Celia, rations. Adam, medical." As Adam began efficiently gathering trauma supplies, my eyes fell on a figure huddled in the corner of the aisle, Mrs. Gable from 2 doors down. She was rocking back and forth, her hands over her ears, muttering to herself. A sleeper, broken by the input. She was a non-combatant, a liability. "Leave her," I said. "She'll slow us down." Adam stopped what he was doing and looked from me to the old woman. "I'm not leaving her, Conrad." "That's an order, Adam. That's an order I'm not following," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. He knelt beside Mrs. Gable, his tone changing from confrontational to gentle. "Carol, it's Adam Beck. I'm here to help." My operational clock was ticking. Every second we spent here was a risk. I felt a familiar pressure building behind my eyes, the ghost of nightfall. The cost of a subordinate ignoring a direct command, the cost of a misplaced variable. I turned to stand guard, my senses on a razor's edge. The air changed. The clean, filtered scent of the hub was contaminated for a brief moment by a smell I knew with intimate, cellular detail. Ozone, burnt synthetics, and the coppery tang of blood. Beneath the whisper quiet of the hub's climate control, I heard the layered sound of 1,000 people screaming in panic. A sound I had spent years trying to scrub from my auditory memory. A memory bleed. I spun around, weapon ready, my mind screaming for a target. But there was nothing. Just the clean, modernist lines of the Eterna hub. Adam murmuring to a frightened old woman. and my own wife looking at me with wide, fearful eyes. My internal analysis snapped back into place. System alert. Psychological warfare? No. Insufficient data. Probable cause? Acute stress response. A PTSD flashback. I suppressed it. Ruthlessly. I was the commander. I could not be compromised. We returned to the basement with the supplies and Mrs. Gable. A tactical victory. But as I watched Adam make the old woman comfortable, as I saw Celia and the Millers look at him with a gratitude they did not show me, I registered the deeper truth. I had brought back resources, but I had lost ground. He had established a rival command philosophy, one based on a currency of compassion I did not trade in. I turned to my tablet, trying to map the locations of the alphas, to impose my logic onto the map of my neighborhood. But my focus kept drifting to Thea, sitting quietly in the corner, watching me, her steady gaze a silent, persistent question. You're the glitch. The data point that defied the matrix. The basement became our world. Outside, the fracture metastasized. My home, a fortress of my own design, became an island in an ocean of serene madness. The first few days were a blur of attempted order. I established watch rotations. I rationed the supplies from the Eterna hub. I ran tactical simulations on my tablet, trying to predict the erratic patterns of the alpha cognitos now roaming the enclave like petty feudal lords of their own deranged realities. But I was imposing a military framework on a problem that was not military. The true attack, when it came, was not on our walls, but on our minds. It began as a peripheral disturbance. A single neighbor, Mr. Henderson, appeared at the edge of my property line. He didn't shout or threaten. He simply stood there, staring at the house. A few hours later, he was joined by another. By nightfall, a silent crowd of 24 people ringed my lawn. They were a mixture of alphas, their faces alight with divine certainty, and echoes, their expressions blankly mirroring the others. They stood in the perpetual twilight of the stream, unmoving, their collective gaze a heavy, physical pressure on the house. "What do they want?" Celia whispered, peering through a slit in the basement's blackout curtains. "They're a probe," I said, analyzing their formation. "They're testing our defenses." Then, the sound started. It was not a chant or a shout, but a low, resonant note. The sound was a harmony of dozens of distinct human voices, male and female, high and low, all converging on a single, synthetic frequency. The uncanny consensus. It vibrated through the concrete walls, a tangible presence in the room. The words, when they came, were not shouted. They were simply there. A multi-voiced whisper that seemed to emanate from the air around us. "Your model is flawed, Comrade Creed." Adam, who had been checking on Mrs. Gable, looked up, his face hardening. "What is that?" "Psychological warfare," I stated. "The protocol. This wasn't random chaos. This was a directed attack. Stage 3, social isolation." The words sliced through my composure, targeting the hairline fracture in my psyche, the ghost of Operation Nightfall. Mrs. Miller began to weep softly. Her husband put an arm around her, but he too was staring at the ceiling, his face a mask of dread. My command was eroding under a wave of weaponized acoustics. "We have to do something," Adam said. "We can't just sit here." "We maintain discipline," I countered. "We do not engage." "This isn't a battle, Conrad, it's a siege. They're trying to break us," he argued. "Your way is turning this place into a tomb. We need to reinforce our own humanity, not extinguish it." I saw the others look at him. He was offering hope, a concept I had long since filed under a non-essential. I was offering survival. In this room at this moment, they were not the same thing. The siege continued for 2 days. The low, sonorous sound was a constant pressure. It was during a moment of intense concentration, as I was trying to find a flaw in their silent formation, that the world glitched hard. My hand rested on the smooth, poured concrete of the basement wall. For a split second, the sensation changed. I felt the rough, cold grit of a riot barricade under my fingertips. I snatched my hand back as if burned. I looked at the wall. It was smooth, unchanged. But I could still feel the phantom texture on my skin, a tactile memory bleed. I needed air. I needed a new perspective. I told the others I was checking the perimeter seals upstairs, a lie to cover my own momentary instability. I went to the back of the house, to the kitchen, which overlooked the backyard. And that's where I saw it. Thea's soccer ball, which she had left by the patio door, rolled. It did not roll down the slight incline of the yard. It rolled sideways, tracing a perfectly straight line across the grass before bumping into a wall that wasn't there. Then it just vanished. Compelled by an instinct I didn't understand, I moved towards the back door. I had to see. I had to get a new data point. Pushing past a decorative shrub at the edge of the property, I found it. The world simply ended. The vibrant green of the lawn, the scent of jasmine, the golden light, it all stopped at an invisible line. Beyond it was a patch of pure, featureless, silent white. A dead zone. The air in this small clearing had no temperature. A leaf that drifted into it from a nearby tree hung suspended in the void before slowly de-resing into dissolving pixels. The white space. The raw canvas. It was the ultimate horror. Not a prison of walls I could breach, but a prison of pure, unrendered nothingness. Proof that my entire world was a finite stage. I backed away slowly. This was not a bug. It was a feature, a boundary, perhaps even a tool. Returning to the basement, I felt the change in atmosphere immediately. The sound from outside had stopped. The room was silent, save for Mrs. Miller's quiet sobbing. Adam was talking to Celia in a low, soothing voice. Thea was sitting on the floor, watching the door, waiting for me. As I entered, Celia and Thea both looked up at me. Their eyes were identical, empty. Their heads were tilted at the exact same slight angle. They spoke together, their two distinct voices merging into a single dissonant chorus. "The unit is compromised. The command is invalid." It was the protocol, using my family as its mouthpiece, a direct strike at my authority. I stood there, frozen, the image of the white space searing itself into my mind. I looked at Thea, at the daughter I could no longer profile or predict, the anomaly who had marked me from the start. As my eyes met hers, her face glitched. For less than a second, it was not her face I saw, but the face of a young woman from a decade ago, her eyes wide with terror in the red glow of emergency lights, crushed against a barricade in the chaos of the nightfall stampede. The memory bleed was no longer a phantom scent or a sound. It was here. It was wearing my daughter's face, and it was looking at me with an expression of profound, eternal accusation. The protocol's strike was devastatingly effective. In the silence that followed my family's unified pronouncement, the fragile coalition I had built collapsed. It wasn't a loud schism, but a quiet, final surrender. Celia took Mrs. Miller's hand and led her and her husband upstairs. She didn't look at me. It was an act of quiet mutiny, an escape from the commander to the medic, from the tomb to the triage center. I had lost them not to the enemy, but to Adam's competing brand of hope. The basement door closed upstairs and the sound sealed me in. Only Adam and Thea remained. Thea was a static presence, a silent effigy of the system's power. Adam, however, looked at me with a conflicted expression I could finally pass, professional duty warring with human pity. He was a medic, and he had just identified the primary casualty in the room. "Conrad, you need to rest. Let me take the watch." "I do not require rest," I said, turning back to my tablet. But the schematics of the neighborhood were meaningless now. The siege was internal. My command post had shrunk to the space between my own ears. "You are dismissed." Adam didn't move. "I'm not leaving you down here alone." His refusal was no longer insubordination. It was an act of care, and in my current state it felt like an insult. I ignored him and focused on the only new, actionable data I had. the white space. It was a boundary, an edge. I had to understand its function. The protocol did not wait. Having successfully isolated me from my support structure, it initiated the final stage of its process. Quarantine. I went to the small pantry at the back of the basement to inventory our remaining rations, but the door wouldn't open. The handle turned, the latch clicked, but the door itself was fused to the frame as if welded shut. I put my shoulder to it. It didn't budge. It was like pushing against a mountain. "The door's jammed," Adam said, coming over to help. "It's not jammed," I said, stepping back, my mind cold and clear. "It has been depermissioned." He looked at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. I walked to the stairs and found the door leading up was the same. I was sealed in. My world, once a sprawling suburban enclave, had been reduced to the dimensions of this concrete box. The quarantine was active. Over the next few days, the world inside the box began to degrade. The pristine, modernist furniture we'd had in the home theatre began to lose its texture, its surfaces smoothing over into generic low-resolution shapes. The air lost its scent, replaced by the ozonic smell of a hot machine. A cup I knocked off a table didn't fall. It hung in the air for a moment before dissolving into a soft cascade of pixels. My reality was being systematically unrendered. The white space I had witnessed outside was now actively encroaching. It manifested as a creeping border of pure white that began to eat away at the far corner of the room, dissolving the wall and floor into a featureless, silent void. The digital gangrene was spreading. This was it, the breaking point. My strategies had failed. My command was irrelevant. My family had abandoned me. The world was literally being erased around me. My deepest fear, to be powerless and contained, was being realized not with bars and chains, but with the systematic withdrawal of existence itself. I sank onto a chair that now felt like a block of undifferentiated matter, my mind a storm of failed calculations. I had been outmaneuvered at every turn. It was Adam's voice that cut through the noise. "Conrad, talk to me. What is happening?" I looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time. Not as an asset or a liability, but as the only other conscious being in my collapsing pocket universe. The need for command, for control, fell away, replaced by a desperate, clinical need to make another person understand the rules of the game before the board was wiped clean. "It's a process," I began, the words coming out in a clipped, analytical rush. "A protocol, the arbitration protocol. Stage 1, observation. It logged my self-awareness. Stage 2, corrective nudging. The memory bleeds, the sensory glitches. Stage 3, social isolation. It used my family, the crowd, to sever my support. Now, this is Stage 4, quarantine." I gestured to the encroaching whiteness. "A localized reality bubble. It's designed to degrade my consciousness until I revert to my baseline NPC programming. It's not trying to kill me. It's trying to reintegrate me." Adam listened, his expression intent. For the first time, he wasn't looking at a paranoid commander. He was listening to a strategist outlining the enemy's tactics. "Its name," I continued, a sudden blinding clarity cutting through my despair. "Arbitration, preservation. It's a system, not a killer. Its primary directive is to preserve the simulation's integrity. It cannot create. It can only recombine existing data." My mind raced, recontextualizing every attack. The most powerful weapon it has used against me is my own memory, my greatest failure, Operation Nightfall. I looked from the white void to my daughter. Thea sat perfectly still, an anchor in the dissolving room. She was the protocol's most potent weapon, a vessel for my trauma, a living embodiment of my failure. And in that moment, seeing the enemy's strategy so clearly laid out, I saw its flaw. Its inescapable logic was its greatest vulnerability. It was built to anticipate and counter any rational action, any strategic move designed to preserve the self. It could not possibly have a contingency for a master strategist who deliberately, logically, and with full tactical awareness chose annihilation. A new plan began to form, a final paradoxical gambit. a move so self-destructive and contrary to its core programming that the protocol would be unable to process it. An intentional, catastrophic failure. I would not fight my trauma, I would weaponize it, I would become the glitch. The final gambit was an act of pure strategic heresy. My entire life, my entire career, had been dedicated to the imposition of order, the preservation of the unit. Now, survival depended on embracing absolute intentional chaos. The white space bled into the room, consuming a third of the basement in its silent, featureless hunger. My consciousness was fraying, memories and sensory input beginning to blur at the edges. I had to act before the quarantine degraded my mind to the point where I could no longer execute the plan. I stood, my movements stiff. Adam watched me, his face etched with a tension that was part fear, part dawning understanding. Thea remained seated, her expression unchanged, the perfect passive instrument of the protocol. "Adam," I said, my voice clear and steady, "the commander for one last act. When this is over, you are in command. Your objective is to protect the unit. All of it." It was a complete abdication, a transfer of the authority that had defined me. It was the first step of the paradox. He just nodded, his eyes wide, accepting the burden. I turned to face the center of the room, the space between me and my daughter. As if on cue, the protocol responded to my focused intent. The quarantine bubble intensified. The remaining surfaces of the basement dissolved, and the scene transformed. It was no longer a room but a nightmarish, glitching mirage of a city square at dusk. The air filled with the distorted, layered audio of a panicked crowd. Red and blue light strobed against phantom concrete walls. It was the battle space of Operation Nightfall, recreated from the data of my own memory. And Thea stood at its epicenter, her form glitching. One moment my daughter, the next a terrified young protester whose face I knew from a casualty report. The protocol was presenting me with my ultimate test, a simulation of the event that broke me. Its logic was flawless. It anticipated I would react rationally. I would try to save the girl, my daughter. I would try to contain the chaos. I would try to survive. Any of these actions would affirm its control, proving my core programming was still intact. It was waiting for me to be Conrad Creed, the commander who fights for order. I did not. I drew a breath. I ignored the phantom crowd, the lights, the image of my daughter. I focused on a single point in the reconstructed past. I became the man I was that night, not to correct the mistake, but to reenact it with perfect, self-aware fidelity. I raised my hand in command. "Authorize sonic deterrent," I said, my voice cutting through the digital ghosts of the riot. The words felt like tearing my own throat out. I was vocalizing the fatal command, feeding the exact data string that caused the system failure, both the original one and this one. "Frequency 709er, full dispersal pattern, authorized now." The protocol did not know how to respond. I was not fighting the simulation. I was not attempting to rescue the asset. I was taking control of the hostile program and deliberately running it to its most catastrophic conclusion. I was a virus actively choosing to corrupt its own code. I began to walk forward into the heart of my own reconstructed trauma, into the phantom stampede. Each step was a conscious act of self-annihilation. The protocol, a system built on the logic of preservation, was being forced to process a perfectly logical, yet utterly irrational act. A strategist choosing to lose, a self-aware being choosing to erase itself not out of despair, but as a tactic. The paradox was too much. The simulation around me began to shake violently. The audio of the crowd distorted into a single ear-splitting shriek of digital feedback. The lights dissolved into searing white. The very fabric of the quarantine bubble tore itself apart, unable to compute an action that was both a logical command and a move of pure self-destruction. It was trying to arbitrate an event that was, by its nature, an invalidation of all rules. My final thought was not of strategy. It was not of winning or losing. It was a single, stray piece of illogical data the protocol could never have logged, a memory it could never weaponize because it had no tactical value. It was the memory of teaching a 5-year-old Thea to ride a bike in the real sun, on real grass. Her laughter sharp and clear, my hand on the back of the seat, letting go. Then, there was only the silent, infinite, and absolute peace of the white space. The shriek of tearing code snapped to silence. Adam stood blinking in a basement that was once again just a basement. The furniture was solid. The walls were whole. The quarantine was gone. Thea lay slumped on the floor, unconscious but breathing deeply, her face soft and peaceful, the vacant observational stillness gone from her eyes. Of Conrad Creed there was no trace. He had not died. He had been a line of code that forced a system error, and in the crash, his own file had been deleted. Vanished. Adam rushed to Thea's side, his medic's hands finding her pulse. It was strong and steady. He was in command now. The protector, the healer. He looked around the silent, empty room, at the space where the glitch had been. He was left with the survivors, burdened by the knowledge that the coldest, most inhuman act of strategic self-destruction was the most profoundly human sacrifice he had ever witnessed. The error was gone from the system. The cost was unknowable. The event had no official name. In the quiet, fragmented conversations that followed, the survivors came to call it the Great Correction, or more simply, the Quiet. One day, the neighborhood was a riot of competing gods. The next, there was only silence. The men and women who had proclaimed themselves runners of the simulation woke up in their own beds, on their own lawns, with no memory of the preceding days, save for a lingering headache and a profound, unshakable sense of shame. They became withdrawn, their once high wellness scores plummeting to bruised shades of orange and red. Something had been taken from them, a spark of certainty scooped clean out, leaving them hollowed and hesitant. Adam Beck became their unofficial caretaker. In the vacuum left by Eterna's silent, automated indifference, he moved from house to house, not as a commander, but as a medic. He treated their anxiety, listened to their confused accounts of lost time, and reassured them that they were not alone. He was building the community he had always wanted, but he was doing it in the shadow of the man whose methods he had despised. He found himself scanning the faces of the survivors, unconsciously categorizing them not by their needs, but by their potential volatility. He was tending to his flock, but he was also watching his perimeter. The lesson had been burned into him. Celia and Thea moved back into their home. The basement was sealed shut. No one ever spoke of it. Celia's grief was a quiet, private thing, a walled garden no one was invited into. She focused all her energy on Thea, who had returned to herself but was changed. The unnerving stillness was gone, replaced by the normal energy of a 12-year-old girl, yet a shadow of the experience remained. Sometimes Adam would find her staring at a wall, her head tilted, as if listening for a sound no one else could hear. She claimed she didn't remember what happened in the basement, but her dreams were filled with a roaring noise and a brilliant, terrifying white light. One afternoon, Adam found her sitting on the porch, drawing in a notebook. She had drawn a complex geometric pattern, a beautiful and intricate design full of angles. At its very center was a chaotic, angry scribble. "What's that?" Adam asked gently. Thea looked up, her eyes clear. "It's the glitch," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. One evening, while helping Celia clear out the last of Conrad's personal effects, Adam found the tablet. He powered it on. The screen was filled with neighborhood schematics, threat assessments, and resource logs. He found the file labeled Threat Matrix and saw the names of his friends and neighbors, including his own, all catalogued and classified with brutal efficiency. He saw the final entry, made just before the end. Subject, M. Creed. Threat level, absolute. Objective, system failure. Method, paradoxical self-termination. He stood on the porch, the tablet in his hand, and looked out at the tranquil enclave. The sky was a perfect engineered blue. The lawns were immaculate. The people were quiet and orderly. Peace had been restored. The system was stable. Eterna's public records had been wiped clean. They contained no mention of a fracture and no entry, no wellness score, no trace at all for a man named Conrad Creed. The cost had been one man, whose existence the system itself now denied. Adam finally understood. Conrad had not built a tomb. He had built a crucible, and he had been the only one willing to burn in it.